Johnny Carson once revealed the 9 Golden Age guests he cherished most. For 3 decades, he welcomed America into his late-night world. As Tonight Show host, he sat across from more than 22,000 guests, spanning unknowns to legends. Yet out of them all, he quietly kept a shorter list, the rare visitors who reached past the spotlight to truly connect with the man behind the desk. Carson was as polished as they came, said a longtime producer. Still, a few select guests managed to make him forget he was on air. With them, Johnny stopped playing host and simply enjoyed the company. But before naming the rest, it's important to see why one man topped Carson's list and created a moment that revealed just how deep their bond was. The first name was tied to a story called Bo, written about a beloved dog. Jimmy Stewart, the only guest who ever made Carson cry. When Stewart appeared, audiences saw something extraordinary. Johnny Carson, usually unshakable, turned into a humbled fan before a true Hollywood giant. Jimmy embodied what America wished to see in itself, Carson once admitted. Genuine, modest, and unpretentious, qualities rare in show business. His visits became yearly traditions eagerly awaited by viewers and Carson alike. Unlike many older stars who recycled polished tales, Stewart brought a hesitant, natural charm that Johnny found rare and honest. Carson admired that Jimmy never tried to act slick, noted another producer. He fumbled for words, paused often, and spoke from the heart instead of playing a part. What locked Stewart's place as Johnny's favorite came during a 1981 appearance when he recited a poem about the passing of his dog. The plain, emotional verses about his retriever brought Carson, famous for restraint, to tears on national TV. "I'd never seen Johnny react like that," recalled a cameraman. "He was overcome, and for once he didn't hide or joke it away. He allowed himself that vulnerable moment with Stewart and his audience." Afterwards, Stewart's importance was undeniable. Carson's staff knew Stewart's bookings guaranteed their boss would be unusually kind. "Johnny even asked us to lengthen Jimmy's segments," shared a former producer. He'd say, "Find him more minutes, cut the break if needed." That request almost never happened for anyone else. Even off-camera, Carson praised Stewart's visits, holding them up in meetings as examples of authentic, timeless television. When Carson's farewell show aired in 1992, Stewart was among the few he personally called to thank. That simple gesture revealed how much he valued their connection. While Stewart showed the heartfelt side of Carson's favorites, the next guest offered something very different, comic precision equal to Johnny's own. Enter Bob Newhart, the man Carson introduced with special warmth. Bob Newhart, the comedian who made it look effortless. Where Stewart stirred Carson's emotions, Newhart engaged his comic instincts. The stand-up turned sitcom star shared Johnny's dry humor, sharp timing, and gift for finding laughs in everyday life. Carson once called him the funniest man alive, said a Tonight Show writer. From Johnny, no praise ranked higher. What separated Newhart from most comics was his casual approach. Instead of delivering rehearsed material, he entered into real conversation that meshed perfectly with Johnny's rhythm. They had incredible timing together, recalled a director. Bob would begin a story, Johnny would add a quick line, and Bob would build on it. Watching them was like hearing 2 jazz players improvise flawlessly. Carson's admiration showed in how he treated Newhart's visits. Though strict about schedules, he often let Bob's time run long, sometimes trimming others to give him more space. When Bob was rolling, Johnny simply let him run, said a former producer. Instead of cutting him short, Carson flashed the stretch signal to hold commercials back. With most guests, Johnny counted the seconds until they wrapped. With Bob, he hoped the moment never finished. What stood out most to Carson about Newhart was his quiet humility. Even with huge success, Newhart never brought an entourage or asked for perks. He treated the crew with kindness and was sincerely thankful to be invited on the show. Johnny disliked divas, the producer explained. Bob was nothing like that. He'd chat with pages, thank the makeup team, and remember camera operators' names from years before. Carson picked up on details like that. Over time, the working relationship turned into a real friendship, with the two occasionally golfing together, something rare for Johnny, who usually kept work and personal life apart. If Carson asked you to golf, it meant he cared for you beyond the spotlight, recalled a longtime friend. Bob was one of the rare stars who crossed that boundary. While Newhart gave Johnny the thoughtful comedy he admired, his next guest offered the opposite, wild energy and unpredictability that kept Carson sharp. Please welcome Burt Reynolds! Applause. Music. Applause. Burt Reynolds, Carson's favorite partner in mischief. Whenever Reynolds joined The Tonight Show, viewers knew it wasn't just a sit-down chat. It was a contest between two friends out to outdo each other. Reynolds understood the game. Most guests never did, Carson admitted, after one unforgettable appearance by the mustached star. At the height of his 1970s fame, Reynolds grasped something many celebrities missed, that TV worked best when the guest treated it as playful partnership, not self-promotion. Johnny loved that Burt came to have fun, not just push a project, explained a Tonight Show writer. While most stars arrived armed with scripted talking points, Reynolds showed up with water pistols hidden in his jacket. Their prank battles became legendary highlights. In one famous bit, Reynolds smeared shaving cream on Carson mid-interview during what was supposed to be a serious movie plug. Instead of being upset, Carson burst with laughter. Staffers said he laughed even harder off camera, grateful for Reynolds' ability to shake up the formula. Johnny loved the thrill of the unexpected, real surprises, not rehearsed ones, noted a longtime director. Reynolds was one of the few who could truly blindside Carson, and Johnny valued that deeply. What impressed him most was Reynolds' ability to take a joke as well as fire one back. When Carson teased him about flop films or love life drama, Burt laughed right along, unlike the thin-skinned stars of Hollywood. Carson had a simple test for whether he liked a guest, shared a longtime producer. Could he poke fun without hurting their ego? Burt passed easily. Not only did he roll with it, he welcomed the ribbing. The genuine friendship showed in the way Carson praised Reynolds off the air. Staffers recalled Carson referencing Burt when prepping nervous guests, pointing to him as the model of a perfect Tonight Show guest. He'd reassure them, "Just relax and enjoy it, like Burt Reynolds does," remembered a talent coordinator. That was Johnny's ultimate compliment. While Reynolds gave Carson chaos and laughter, the next favorite guest brought something else, intellectual firepower that allowed Carson to show his hidden side. "We'd been on the same stage and nothing bad happened to you." "That's true! And you were there." Orson Welles, the genius who mesmerized Carson. To most viewers, Johnny was the easygoing host who thrived on comedy sketches and celebrity banter. But close friends knew he had a serious intellectual side, one that surfaced most when Orson Welles appeared. Carson was genuinely fascinated by Orson, said a producer. Not dazzled like with Jimmy Stewart, but deeply curious. When Welles was booked, Johnny would study up on history, literature, and theater, something he rarely did for anyone else. What set Welles apart was the tone of their talks. Instead of gossip or promotion, they dove into art, politics, magic, and history, showing layers of Carson hidden from the public. Those exchanges revealed the private Johnny, said a writer. A man well-read, endlessly curious, able to shift from Shakespeare to a silly giraffe gag without missing a beat. One standout night featured Welles performing intricate magic tricks on air. The illusion stunned the crew and thrilled Carson, who had loved magic since childhood. Johnny's expression was unforgettable, recalled a cameraman. Like a child at a carnival, lost in pure wonder. After one breathtaking trick, Johnny looked into the camera during a break and told viewers, "Did you see that? That was real magic, not television magic." Carson valued Welles most for his honesty. Though celebrated as one of the cinema's greatest directors, Welles openly discussed both triumphs and failures, a candor rare in a business built on polished images. He would admit to being fired from films or having projects scrapped without the usual Hollywood gloss, remembered one producer. Johnny admired that bluntness deeply. He disliked when stars acted as if everything they touched was a success. Even when their exchanges stretched The Tonight Show's light format, Carson never hurried Welles or forced him toward safer subjects. Instead, he welcomed the chance to connect on a deeper level than usual interviews allowed. Johnny once told me those talks with Orson were among his highlights of his career, said a close friend. Carson explained, "For those moments, I feel like myself, not just Johnny Carson." While Welles gave him intellectual fulfillment, Carson's next treasured guest embodied comedy, the foundation of his career. A legend, please welcome Jack Benny. Benny, the mentor who shaped Johnny's path. Each time Benny appeared, audiences saw Johnny drop his usual composure. The controlled host suddenly became a student in front of one of comedy's great pioneers. "He's the reason I chose this profession," Carson admitted to a colleague after Benny's visit. "Every time I watched him, I was learning comedy." Benny's fingerprints on Carson's style were obvious to anyone familiar with their work. The timing, the expressions, the ability to earn laughs with silence, all Benny's trademarks that Johnny absorbed into his own routines. "Johnny defined Johnny's comedic philosophy," said a writer from Carson's team in the 1970s. The belief that punchlines weren't essential, that reactions could be funnier, that pauses could outshine words. That was pure Benny, and Johnny knew it. When Benny came on the show, Johnny's reverence showed through. He laughed more sincerely, listened more closely, and displayed a warmth unseen with others. According to staff, Carson even shifted the physical setup to give Benny the best camera angles. Johnny instructed directors, "Focus on Jack's reactions, not mine," recalled a producer. That was unprecedented. It revealed just how much he admired Benny's genius. What made these visits extraordinary was the passing of a torch. Benny, born in 1894, had pioneered radio comedy when Carson was a child. By the 1970s, when Benny appeared on Tonight, he was in his late 70s. Yet his timing remained flawless. "Watching Johnny with Jack was like witnessing comedy's history unfold," said one director. Here was late night's reigning king in conversation with the man who invented the template decades earlier. Johnny always remembered that legacy. Johnny's admiration for Benny went beyond the stage. Friends recalled he kept a framed photo of Benny in his office, the only celebrity portrait he displayed privately. That photo summed up his respect, explained a longtime companion. It wasn't about the biggest names of the moment or even himself, but the man who showed him how television comedy could shine. While Benny represented tradition, Carson's next beloved guest brought something equally priceless, an easy warmth that turned appearances into reunions, not performances. It's hard to believe it was 1967 when Harvey, Vicky, Lyle, and I first walked on stage. Carol Burnett, the guest who radiated joy. When Burnett joined The Tonight Show, something unusual happened. Johnny, normally guarded, seemed to relax completely. His shoulders loosened, his grin widened, and the invisible wall between him and his guests briefly vanished. "Carol brings light with her," Carson told Ed McMahon after one appearance. What set Burnett apart was the natural rapport she had with Johnny. Instead of the typical formality of Tonight interviews, their chats felt like old friends catching up. With most guests, Johnny was clearly the host, and they were the visitor, explained one director. With Carol, it was two equals enjoying each other's company. The audience felt that instantly. Burnett was among the rare guests Johnny let go fully unscripted. While others followed pre-arranged questions, Carol was free to wander, start games, or even interview Carson herself. "Johnny trusted her completely," noted a producer. "He knew she had the instincts, the timing, and the care to never put the show at risk. That trust was nearly unheard of." What Carson loved most about Burnett was her lack of ego. Despite her stardom, she came with no entourage, no demands, and always treated the crew with genuine kindness. She remembered stagehands and camera operators from years before, one staffer recalled. She'd ask about their families and truly listen. Johnny noticed and valued that deeply. Their affection was visible whenever she appeared. Normally strict about segment timing, Carson often extended her spots, sometimes cutting others short. If the producer signaled to wrap, Johnny would wave it off if Carol was in the middle of a story, one director recalled. That never happened with most guests, no matter how famous. The clearest proof of his fondness came when Johnny brought her up even when she wasn't there. Staff said he often cited Burnett as the standard while preparing for others. While Burnett gave him warmth and spontaneity, Carson's next favorite brought another kind of authenticity. Quiet strength without Hollywood posturing. Never another series? And here you are with one again. James Garner, the star who embodied the real. When Garner appeared on Tonight, audiences saw something rare. Two men chatting like friends, instead of an actor promoting work. "He's the kind of movie star others should be, but usually aren't," Carson joked to a producer after one of Garner's visits. What Johnny admired most in Garner was his genuineness. Unlike many leading men who performed even off-screen, Garner's natural presence on The Tonight Show felt refreshingly unforced. "Johnny could spot a fake instantly," said a longtime talent coordinator. James never pretended to be something he wasn't. On or off camera, the man you saw was the same. Garner's Hollywood tales carried an unusually grounded tone. Instead of boasting, he emphasized jokes on set, friendships with crew, and mistakes that rarely appeared in polished industry accounts. When James discussed stardom, it sounded as ordinary as someone describing a regular office job, recalled a writer who often worked with him. Steve McQueen's tantrums, for example, were retold like stories about a tricky coworker, equal parts fondness and frustration, with no awe attached. This unpolished honesty shaped how Garner behaved away from the spotlight, too. Staff frequently noted how he showed up without fanfare, greeted crew with gratitude, and treated interns the same as executives, a trait Johnny Carson quietly admired. Carson noticed details that others missed, like how guests acted toward staff when no one important seemed to be watching. James excelled in those moments without fail. What made Garner stand out most among Johnny's favorites was his ability to span generations. He spoke of legends in ways that entertained older viewers, yet carried a casual charm that connected with younger audiences. Though Garner worked alongside Brando, Andrews, and countless others, he never bragged or seemed overly impressed with his resume. As one producer put it, Johnny loved that James could honor old Hollywood without sounding dated, and that genuine ease defined their on-air chemistry. Carson, usually careful to keep his guard up, sometimes shared private stories or inside jokes when James appeared, a rare exception to his usual boundary between personal and public life. While Garner embodied the simple authenticity Johnny valued, the next guest offered something just as meaningful, a living link to comedy's past. "I'm on my 10th or 11th cigar. I smoke 15 to 20 every day. That's me." George Burns was the legend who only sharpened with age. Whenever Burns visited The Tonight Show in his later years, audiences saw Carson, normally in command, treat him with the reverence of royalty. By his 80s, 90s, and even past 100, Burns represented everything Johnny respected: survival in a fickle business and a direct line to vaudeville, the foundation of Carson's own comedy instincts. Producers recalled Johnny growing nervous before Burns' appearances, not from fear of failure, but from profound respect for his stature in comedy. It was like watching a musician ready himself to perform before Mozart. Burns' brilliance was that he aged like fine wine. While others clung to old material, he kept creating sharp jokes well into his 90s. Writers remembered Johnny often saying, "Most comics peak and hang on, but George keeps climbing." That admiration showed in the interviews, where Carson sometimes stepped back entirely, letting Burns carry the moment. Directors noticed Johnny staying silent for minutes at a time when George hit his stride. For Johnny, who usually interjected often, that restraint was remarkable. Burns himself acknowledged the privilege. In his memoir, he said, "If Carson likes you, you're untouchable in this business. And for some reason, he always liked me." Insiders agreed the reason was clear. Burns embodied timing, polish, and discipline, qualities Carson prized. To Johnny, Burns made tough work appear effortless. The deepest respect showed during commercial breaks. Instead of prepping with producers, Johnny stayed glued to Burns, asking about performers from the 1920s and 1930s who had shaped his own path. As one cameraman put it, Johnny was sitting in on a personal comedy masterclass, and he cherished every second. While Burns gave Johnny a tie to comedy's origins, his final favorite guest reflected another kind of milestone: trailblazing female power in television. "He's a pro. I like pros, especially ones who deliver." That's how Carson introduced Lucille Ball, a true queen of TV. When Lucy joined The Tonight Show, it felt like two pioneers meeting, Carson reshaping late night and Ball having transformed sitcoms years earlier. Royalty, Johnny called her during his 10th anniversary special, openly admitting his admiration in front of viewers. Her appearances stood out not just for sharp comedy, but for the mutual recognition between two icons who fully grasped television's burdens. As one producer explained, both had carried shows for years, knowing the pressure of millions expecting laughs, which gave their bond unusual weight. Carson, who usually stayed in control, often deferred to Lucy, laughing openly at her jokes, giving her the spotlight, and showing unusual warmth. A director remembered him telling camera operators, "Focus on Lucy's reactions more than mine," an unheard of instruction. One unforgettable moment came in 1973 when Johnny surprised Lucy with footage from her first screen test. She was moved to tears before regaining her composure with a trademark quip. A Tonight Show writer noted that this proved how deeply Carson understood what would touch her and how much trust Lucy placed in him to reveal real emotion. What Carson admired most, though, was her pioneering business sense. As the first woman to run a major studio, she achieved the kind of authority Johnny himself respected. A close friend recalled Johnny saying Lucy wasn't just the funniest woman, but the smartest person in television, period. The bond was obvious in how he treated her on set. Unlike with most guests, Johnny often extended her segments, even bumping others if she was in the middle of a great story. Producers noted that when signaled to wrap, he sometimes waved them off if Lucy had more to give. That kind of freedom was almost unheard of. Even when she wasn't present, Johnny spoke of her often, holding her up as an example of grit and brilliance to other guests. As one longtime producer summed it up, Lucy embodied every quality Carson valued: talent without ego, success without vanity, and the rare ability to master both the art and business of television.